My fellow Americans, we are facing a constitutional crisis. But we're not facing the one that you might be thinking of. We are not facing a constitutional crisis over election fraud. I'm not here to comment on that. We are not facing a constitutional crisis over the supposed sedition of Trump supporters storming the Capitol. I am not here to comment on that either. I'm here to comment on a much more fundamental level about what is happening in this country. Allow me to read the First Amendment of the United States. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Congress has made no law affecting freedom of speech. But there are corporations that have far more power and influence over how we communicate than the government does. We need to make and petition for an amendment to the First Amendment that strictly prohibits any outside entity outside of the United States government from creating laws and standards and policies and practices that prohibits the First Amendment. In the same way that we have a First Amendment that prohibits the government, we need a First Amendment that prohibits companies, specifically ones that act as platforms for speech, from doing that very same thing. This is the cause of revolution that we all need to be geared towards. President Trump has lost. Whether it's right or wrong, he has lost this round. America is not over after one round. People thought America was over after Obama. People thought America was over after Bush. Everyone always thinks America is over. But these documents, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, these are what America are. You don't actually have to be a citizen, in my humble opinion, to be an American. You just have to appreciate the freedoms that are given to us on paper and that are protected by the three branches of government. But we need change. Social media is the biggest threat to the world. It is the equivalent of what nuclear power was in the early 20th century. It has the ability to shape minds, to change the populace's opinions on any topic. It has the ability to censor at will. It has the ability to destroy people's livelihoods and economic freedom. We need to petition Congress to make a new amendment that not only prohibits Congress from making any laws that abridge freedom of speech, but specifically prohibits any business whose act it is to allow speech from doing the same thing. Companies like Facebook and Twitter, and Parler, for that matter, should allow any speech that is short of incitement of violence. I don't care if you're a far lefty and you hate white people. Talk about your hate of white people all you want. I will fight to defend your right to do that. That is allowed. And vice versa. Look at the extremes. So long as you're not inciting violence, it's allowed. This is the cause we need to be fighting for. This is a constitutional crisis where big tech has more power than Congress, than the president, than the judicial branch of government to influence our elections in ways that fit their own private agenda. And that is wrong. Nobody, regardless of whether you're a liberal, whether you're a Republican, whether you're a conservative, or you're a Democrat, or if you're one of those Gary Johnson types, I don't know. You are an American if you like your ability to criticize America, to criticize its leaders. If you like your ability to criticize me, let's do a thought experiment here. Let's say that Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg were highly conservative. They probably would have been censoring all the BLM stuff that was going on. They probably would have been removing all of those posts and allowing strictly MAGA posts. It would have been a double standard either way. Those individuals at the top who have complete centralized authority over who sees what on their platforms have let their own personal biases influence what their constituents see. When I post something on Facebook, I am a constituent of Facebook. I am basically part of that business. That is actually how their model works. Watch The Social Dilemma. It explains it quite thoroughly. But we need to rally together behind the cause of amending the Constitution that specifically protects against technocratic invasion of our liberal freedoms. And these are freedoms that everyone can appreciate. I don't care if you're an Obama supporter. I don't care if you're a Trump supporter. This is something we should all be able to agree on. The freedom of speech is the freedom of thought, and freedom of thought allows adaptability to change, and that is why America has been one of the best countries that has ever existed in recent times. We don't have a perfect history, but our founding documents, belief that these rights were given to us by God, is what allowed people like Martin Luther King Jr. to petition the government to change and redress its ways. If there was no freedom of speech, none of the civil progress that we've made could have been achievable. None of it. Let that sink in for a moment. That this document that was written by white slave owners, specifically, actually, not specifically, but it allowed for people who were the ancestors or the offspring of slaves, the descendants of slaves, to rise up and reclaim their freedom that they always should have had. It allowed women to do the same thing. These documents were ahead of their time, and they have allowed the oppressed, the downtrodden, to speak for themselves. But we're in a dangerous time right now. Like I said, imagine if Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey were conservative. They'd be silencing the liberal voices, the leftist voices, the pro-Marxists, the communists. I want to debate these people. I don't want to be shut down by these people. And I don't want them shut down. And I wouldn't want them to shut me down. The only way we're going to figure out which ideas work is if we're able to have a civil discourse about it. Not yell at each other, not get angry at each other, but be able to articulate the underlying assumptions for the beliefs that we hold. The underlying belief that every person holds in their heart is that they have a right to speak their mind. The First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech. Well, guess what? I say that if you allow a foreign entity to subvert this, it is just as bad as passing that law yourself. Plain and simple. America first. I don't care if you're a liberal. I don't care if you're a Republican. America first.